to try once more our first installment of Tea with Dr. Ben.
All right.
Tea is in quotes, of course, because, you know, I'm probably not drinking tea. Since we're not doing a video call, you can't actually see what sort of yellowish liquid I have. But... Stop it! Stop it, Scott!
You can't keep doing that to me.
Am I supposed to halt this?
Oh, I'm going to keep doing it to you. We're only doing this to have fun, so, I mean, you know, it's not like we're getting paid or anything.
We're off to a great start.
Right?
As a comedian, I heard many, many years ago, some of this shit I just do for me. I don't give a damn whether you think it's funny or not. But if we all laugh, that's even better. Who cares what the audience thinks, right?
Right?
So, all right.
It's always funnier when it's happening to somebody else.
So, yeah, okay. Tea with Dr. Ben. Tea is in quotes because we may or may not be drinking tea as we sit around. I'll go ahead and tell you a little bit about it. We've got 3 segments that we've got planned that we'll do as this thing progresses, evolves, whatever you want to say. We have the dumpster diving segment where we'll discuss pseudoscience and things that aren't quite mainstream science. It's not necessarily a bad thing. Today is technically a dumpster diving segment. We're going to talk about UFOs. But since everybody on the chat has a UFO story and we're all sort of believers, it's not to pick on people. So hopefully we'll have a good talk on that. The other segments that we'll bring in as time goes on is called the Round Table. We'll call that Real Science with Real Scientists. I'll actually get some of my scientist friends online and we'll discuss futurism, various things, CRISPR, genetic engineering, nuclear physics, space travel, colonization, things like that. And then I got another segment I'm planning called Keeping It Real, where I'll actually do experiments online and you guys can watch. Hopefully we'll get the video going for that. It looks like we have some bandwidth issues when 4 or 5 of us are online and try to do video. So we'll keep the other podcast to the audio track only for the time being. Now, here with us we have Summer, who's going to be my moderator, because even though this is sort of my baby, I feel like I need a moderator. So, and the way I always explain that is, if I'm doing a junk science segment and I want to call somebody a dipshit, I want to feel free to do that. So I can call them a dipshit and then the moderator can step in and tell me, hey, you shouldn't say that, and then I'll do it anyway. But if I have to self-moderate, I can't do that. So that's why we have Summer with us. With that, we'll do a round of introductions, and we'll start with Summer, if you like, and you can tell us more about yourself, Summer.
I'm a mom and a wife, and I'm 28, and I just do this sort of thing all day, so.
Cool.
Hi.
Scott, jump in there.
All right, my name is Scott, and I help run Ask Dr. Ben.
Is that all you do?
Pretty much.
Other than that and download porn and touch yourself every now and then?
I'm a single parent. I raise a kid. That's about it.
Okay. And then our guest for today, David.
Hey guys, what's going on? Yeah, I'm David Warner. I'm just a full-time caregiver here at home and living out in the middle of nowhere. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, we're certainly glad to have you. David sort of
David.
is the catalyst for this. He started telling us a UFO story online, and it's like, man, we got to capture this on tape. We got to get this. So he'll be sort of the centerpiece of the whole thing today. And I guess, to some degree, some introduction for myself is in order. So I'm Dr. Ben, nuclear physicist turned semi-retired Scotch drinker, and I do this for fun too. So, you know, I guess that's all I need for an intro as well. So with that, why don't we kick it off with our round of stories? Now, we'll let David go last because he's got the best one. Who wants to go first?
I think you should, Dr. Ben.
Well, then I will. Mine's pretty simple and straightforward. I definitely saw something that was a UFO, whether it's alien in origin or not. It was certainly unidentified and remains unidentified to this day. I was maybe 12. That would have put it around 1976. And I was in the swimming pool, hanging out, doing my thing like a 12-year-old would do, and looked up and saw 3 flying saucers just going across the sky. It was a clear blue day. They were flying in a perfect triangular formation. And I would guess, I mean, it's hard to know when you've got just a flying saucer there, you know, what the scale is. But if I were to guess, I would guess they were at about 30,000 feet. They were pretty high up. They were probably doing 400 miles an hour or so. And they were probably 50, 60 feet in diameter. So they were, you know, they were substantially sized, you know, crafts. They didn't make a noise. They didn't leave a contrail at all. And I, to this day, don't know what it was. They certainly rotated, and I don't even know how I knew that they were rotating since they were pretty much white and featureless, but I guess there was enough dirt or something on the bottom that I got the sense that they were rotating, so they were literally flying through the sky like a frisbee. And it's pretty cool. But, you know, my dad was an air traffic controller. He came home from work that day. I asked him if he saw anything on the radar, and he's like, no, if it's a military aircraft or it doesn't have a transponder in it, you're not going to see it on civilian radar. So, you know, there's no record of it. There's no way to ever recreate it or refigure what happened on that day. So, that's all I got.
I have a question.
What's that?
Have you ever heard of Project Silverbug?
No, that's a new one to me.
Yeah, it's supposed to be pretty much like you're describing, although I can't remember all the details off the top of my head, but if I remember correctly, I think it was Avro that tried to put it together, and it was basically a flying saucer with the jet engines inside of it. And the way it would work and stabilize itself is by spinning the outside of it.
Oh, yeah. Well, you know, the spinning definitely adds to the stability. Just look at a Frisbee, and you know that, right? What was that called? Avrobug?
It was Project Silverbug.
Silverbug.
It was supposed to be canceled. It was supposed to be canceled a long time ago, but people have been claiming to see what looks like Project Silverbug well after it was supposed to be canceled.
Huh, interesting. All right, who's next?
Well, I guess I'll go next. Mine's not that interesting, so... I was 8, so that would be like 1998 or so. And we lived at a farmhouse. We had a field next to our house. And I woke up to get like a drink of water. And I saw a light at my window. I didn't see like a shape or anything. I just saw a light and then like a bunch of little lights around it. And like as soon as I focused on what it was, it just kind of like disappeared, I guess you could say. Gone. And so I don't know, I ran to my parents' room and I slept in their bed for the rest of the night. And that's it. That's my story.
Cool. And when did you say that was?
98.
98.
I think it was. Because I was 8.
Okay.
Was it at night or?
It was at night. It was like the middle of the night.
So it was fairly dark. You couldn't see a shape?
No shape. I just saw lights. Like the lights were so bright that like it just kind of obscured everything else.
Right.
Interesting.
Wow.
Did it go up or?
It kind of just like flitted like away. I don't know how to describe it. Like a jerky kind of like thing, and then it just was gone.
Fast?
Wow.
Yeah, it was fast.
How far away from the house do you think?
It was really, really close. Like I could see, like there was just the one big light, and I could see the little lights. Like they were all perfectly spaced. Like I was seeing, I guess, the underside of what. That's what I thought it was the underside of whatever it was.
Wow.
Very interesting.
It scared the crap out of me.
Wow.
I didn't sleep
Very
for a few days.
Well,
Very interesting.
Do you remember if was the window open or?
The window was closed. It was
I
like.
was going to ask you if you smelled.
Sorry.
I was going to ask you if you smelt anything, or, you know. So.
I didn't smell anything. I just, like, felt, like, you know, like that was there, and I looked, and that was it. Because it was, like, wintertime, so we had our windows closed.
Right.
Interesting.
Did you go out there the next day?
That's interesting.
I didn't go out to the field, but I did, like, stand at the edge of it. I was too afraid to go in the field. But I was, like, really curious as to, like, why they were there.
Did you notice any disturbances or anything on the ground?
We did have pigs, and our pigs were, like, a little freaked out the next day. We had to, like, round them back up and put them back in their pen because they broke out.
Well,
that was about the only thing. There wasn't any missing. Yeah?
Summer, were there any trees, like, close by? Was this thing, like, right outside the window, 20 feet outside the window, 50 feet?
It was, like, right, it was, like, I wouldn't say right outside the window, but I wouldn't be able to touch it, but it was, like, so close. I don't know exactly how far away it was.
Did you have, were there any trees or saplings?
I think we had trees. Near? We did have trees.
Yeah, you don't remember any of the branches on the tops being broken or anything, or recognizing anything like that?
No.
Interesting.
Do you have any lights on in the house?
Did I have any lights on in the house at the time?
Yeah.
Everybody was asleep, so I don't think we would have had any lights on. I didn't even have, like, a night light at that time, because I was not too scared of the dark anymore.
I got you.
But
So
I was
you
after that, so...
Didn't have a hall light on or anything like that?
No, I think the only light that maybe would have been on would have been in the bathroom, and that was, like, upstairs. I'd have to get out of bed and go up there. This was, like... that would be, like, the only light that I think would be on, because my parents were even asleep. That's how late it was. Because they stayed up pretty late.
Okay. All right, Scott.
8 years old.
Yes, I was 8. I didn't hear anything at all. Like, there was no noise at all. I felt like I stood there. I stood there for, like, I don't know. It felt like longer than it was. And then it was gone.
Like time slowed down, but...
Yeah.
Just because you're focused on something, not because time actually slowed down.
Yeah, no.
Right. It's just the adrenaline. Just the effect of the adrenaline.
Right.
That we know of.
Right. That's our guess, yeah. All right, Scott, we're saving David for last, so that means you're on deck.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I grew up in Southern California. In Ventura County, we had a orange ranch, and we used to spend a lot of time outside, especially at night. And my stepbrother and I were out way away from the house, probably a couple miles anyway. And off in the distance, we see a blue light slowly rising up in the horizon. Could not tell if it was big or small, how near or far it was. You could just see this really bright blue light. And it slowly rose up and then moved across from horizon to horizon. And it stayed blue the entire time. Very weird, very creepy. But freaked us out, freaked up, my stepmom out. My dad and I kind of wanted to stay outside and photograph it. But anyways, making a long story short, the next night, evidently so many people had called in about it that they said that it was a missile test in the Pacific from the Navy. But I have seen rocket launches before, and it did not look like a rocket launch. But that doesn't mean it was something that the Navy was testing that was different than what a normal rocket launch would look like.
Right. Angle may make a big difference, too, if it was way out to sea and you were looking at it like head on or something.
Right. Yeah, this is just a blue, kind of elongated light, like a rocket flame would be, but it stayed bright blue the whole time. Really bright blue.
Well, that's not surprising. I mean, there are rocket fuels that burn blue, so that's, that could make sense.
Right. Yeah,
That's usually like the explanation they use is missiles and stuff like that. From what I've seen, that's usually.
Well, this was 1986, so I mean, around 1986, maybe not exactly, but I would have been roughly 10 years old. So, yeah.
But you say your dad was with you, right?
Yeah, we went inside it from the time we first saw it to the time we couldn't see it anymore was, I don't know, maybe 30 minutes or so. And we had time to go back up and get my dad and bring the rest of the family out. And everybody saw it.
Interesting. All right, David.
Very.
Tell us a big one,
So
David.
this experience was back in '82 in Palm Desert, California, on a summer night, and it was a very dark night, just the stars, and I was walking down the road, and I felt this pressure from above me. Someone was pushing down on me. So I looked up, and I noticed that the stars were being blotted out. And I'm looking closer, and I start to recognize and see this shape in the sky. And it was a massive triangle. It was a black triangle, and it was so black that it was hard to see. But you could see that because it was black and it had this blotting out the stars as it went by. You could see it. I'm looking closer and trying to see this thing, and you know what? It was massive. This thing had to have had 200-foot deep sides, and then when it passed by over me, was perfectly flat like the sides, and had to be a couple 100 feet deep, it seems. And the back of it looked like this thing was so massive, and it was totally silent. But you could see that it was perfectly flat on both of the sides. Well, the one side that I saw, which would have been the left, so I assume the other side was a perfect triangle, basically. And it was like a flat black, or and that's kind of hard for me to say too, because it was so dark. I could see that it had depth, and that it was very, very deep. I'm saying at least a couple 100 feet deep, and I'm assuming a mile long from tip to tip on the back, and then from the back to the front of whatever this thing was. And then as it passed by, again, it was making no sound whatsoever. It was passing by, and I could see the back of it, and it looked like it had. And I had to really look hard, because I'm telling you, there was no real light in the sky. It was just the desert sky, super dark, and the stars. I'm looked at the back of this thing, and there were like 4 lights, I guess, because they didn't look like they served any other purpose. They looked like they must have been some kind of a light. What kind, I don't know, but they were like a really super, really, really dark blue. It was almost as if they made this thing so, and the lights and this craft or whatever it was, so that people couldn't see it, at night, obviously. It was in the daytime, it was massive. So, and it was just crawling along at just like almost like no speed, but it was cruising along and just kept on going. And the enormity of this thing was, it was enormous, colossal, gargantuan. All these words just seemed too small to describe how big this thing was. And so, one of the other things that baffled me was how can anything get off the ground, with regular jet propulsion or any of the methods that we know of now? How could something, let alone an airspace, an airfield that would be big enough to, for this thing to take off? And then, years and years later, just very recently, within the past couple years, I saw old video of the what they call a or the Arizona Lights, I guess, or the Phoenix Lights. And one of the folks that was being interviewed said, I looked up and the stars were being blotted out, and that, bam, right there, it took me back. It took me right back to when I saw this thing. And he said it was a perfect triangle and it was massive. Another man said you could have, he said that one of his friends said, well, maybe it was a B-2 bomber or something. The guy said this man was, military and he was, a older gentleman. He said to his buddy, man, that we could have landed every single one of our B-52s on the back of this thing. Now, that described what I saw. That's how massive this thing was. And then I guess I can't remember his name. Goldie Hawn's husband. I guess he's a pilot. He was talking about the day he was bringing his son into Arizona and landing the same night that these Arizona Lights were happening. And he said that this thing he saw it. And he said this thing was massive. I mean, it was just, undescribable, I guess. And so, with all of these different people witnessing this, it really, because I saw this and I can only tell people I saw it. And so when you hear other people talk about this sort of a thing, and it sounds so much like your experience, it sort of validates it, and so it really got me excited. And, so, I mean, it was, words can't really describe what kind of an experience it was, really. It was phenomenal, beyond imagination. I mean, one of the things that I really, really remember was how big it was, and that I guess it must have been low in the sky, and the size of this thing was so massive that as it came over me, I started to feel its presence pushing down on me between the space on the ground and the bottom of this thing. I mean, that's all I can really imagine. I don't know anything about any of that stuff, but how would I have looked up? Why would I have felt to look up? It was this pressure. And so, and when I did look up, I noticed that right away, I saw the tip of the nose of this thing, and the stars were blotting out. And then the rest of it proceeded, and it just took over the entire area, everywhere I was. It was fascinating, really.
Well, that is interesting. Now, you said it was slow moving, right?
Very slow moving.
How old were you at the time?
15.
15.
Yep.
Could it have been like a big, really, really big blimp or something, like a dirigible?
So, I don't know enough about those things to say that it could have been or well, what I can say is that the depth of the sides of this craft, I'll call it, in the back of it, it was so deep. I mean, they had to be a couple 100 feet deep. And help me with this, Ben. The way that it was built, it looked like a great big perfect wonky triangle, black metal triangle in the sky. It didn't look anything like a balloon. So, like I said before, I don't know how technical they can get and what kind of shapes they can make balloons out of and all that, but this thing just didn't look like a balloon to me.
Okay.
Any balloon I've ever seen.
It looked rigid to you.
Yes, it was perfect.
Well, of course, the old Zeppelins were rigid too. They actually had a framework in them.
Yes, I remember that.
And there's certainly plenty of metallic-looking, fabrics and materials. Just think of the Mylar birthday balloons that everybody gets for their kids now.
For sure.
I have a question.
Dead black.
Huh?
Yes, Summer, tell us.
There's
Sure.
like a thing that gets asked a lot by people I've told the story to, so I was just going to ask the same question here, I guess. Did any of you guys watch any
Sure.
movies about like aliens or anything like that before any of this? Because I know I didn't.
I'm pretty sure I did.
I would add that I wasn't really into. I mean, when I was a kid, I watched Star Wars, and that was wonderful and everything. But I was never a huge sci-fi fan or whatnot. I mean, and you know what? When I think back now, it wasn't like UFOs were a great big huge deal. I guess maybe kind of how they were in the late 50s and 60s, maybe in that time, after Roswell and all that sort of stuff. So it wasn't anything that it wasn't anything that I was into or anything like that. So yeah, no, I mean, just personally speaking.
Okay. How about you guys? Ben, Scott?
Oh yeah, I definitely can remember seeing a documentary about UFOs, specifically flying saucers, at around that point in time in my life. I actually sort of, I sent you that link, so you already know where I'm going to be going with this before we wrap this up.
Yeah.
I certainly think that, you can be young and impressionable, and you can watch a quote-unquote documentary, and Scott can tell you how I get when I get started on the documentaries. And it'll put ideas in your head, and it can definitely, and those ideas can manifest themselves.
I didn't get into looking into stuff like that until I was in the 30s and 40s, and got YouTube, and got to go checking out stuff that they where they're talking about UFOs and all this sort of stuff.
Right.
But when I was 15 and before that and after that for years, it wasn't something I was super privy to or anything, or that really sparked my interest or anything like that. At least that's just for me.
Yeah, no, I understand. I wasn't into that either.
So what about you, Scott? Were you impressed by anything? Were you an impressionable child and somebody put the idea in your head, or you think no?
I can absolutely say I was an impressionable child, but the thing is that where we lived, we didn't actually get anything on TV, so we had movies. So of course we saw, I've seen Star Wars and E.T. and all that stuff, but it's not something that would have made me see what I saw in the sky.
Yeah, but even so, Fire in the Sky probably came out, about the time you're talking about. I mean, there were movies about UFO encounters, E.T.,
Right.
Close Encounters.
I did see E.T. and stuff. Yeah, I did see E.T. and stuff, but again, it was watching movies and TV for me was maybe a once-a-week thing.
So, I'm the only one that's willing to say that I might have had an idea implanted in my head. That's what I'm hearing.
I don't remember watching anything like that. I can't say for certain if I did or didn't, but my parents were always into black and white movies, Jerry Lewis, Nick and Night things, and that's what they'd watch, and so I'd have to watch that with them.
Yeah. So I would be able to say, Ben and Scott and Summer, I would be able to say to you, that I was impressionable, or if I was, that this might have played into my psyche somehow, but that's not the case. Not the case at all. It was a very a very strange thing that you don't forget.
I'm just taking notes and looking for patterns here. One of the things I wrote down was ages. I got 8, 10, 12, and 15. So, I mean,
Right.
That's why I asked, because that's what usually gets asked of me. Is, well, you were young. Did you remember anything or something like that?
I can add something. My stepbrother instantly was saying UFO, UFO. He was saying it the whole time. When my stepmother came out with my dad, my stepmother started in, it's a UFO, it's a UFO, it's a UFO. And my dad and I were standing there going, I don't know, it's a blue light in the sky. It could be anything. So,
sure.
Yeah.
I mean, we kind of had both sides of the aisle.
There you go. Yeah, but you did have somebody sort of trying to steer you in that direction, whether they were doing it deliberately or not.
Absolutely.
Well, that's interesting. Summer, you want to take over from here, or you want me to keep going?
Okay, I have a question.
Okay.
I guess we're going to do, you want to talk about the pyramids? And your thoughts on aliens and pyramids and things?
Oh, yeah. Well, I had a quick thought on that one. I was watching a show the other day. I mean, this was sort of off on a tangent compared to what we've been talking about. But I was watching a show the other day about making castles in Great Britain. And this would have been, 1,000 years ago. And they were talking about making the biggest castle, the Windsor Castle. I forget the name of it. But they had 1,000 troops in the middle of a battlefield, basically, or at least in hostile territory. 1,000 troops built that castle in a year, maybe 2. And they did it under adverse conditions. They did it while people were attacking them and everything else. So my thought on that was the whole, aliens building the pyramids. There's just absolutely no need for that because, this castle is maybe an order of magnitude smaller than the pyramids of Giza, but 1,000 men built it in a year. And the numbers I've heard for the pyramids are, like 20,000 slaves. We're still talking hand tools, even in 1500.
It's just like, sorry, go ahead.
No, that's the point. I've not actually done any calculations because I can't get good numbers on the total mass of that castle, but it might be 10 times bigger, and there might be 10 times as many people involved, and they took. They usually say that the archaeologists say that it usually took like 20 years to build. So it's much larger than the stone castle that we're talking about, but it took, 10 times as many people and 10 times as much time. So there's a factor of 100 right there. No aliens required.
There you go.
Sorry? I was just going to say the argument usually is that they're lined up with stars or something. I'm just looking into like a lot of the things that people say when they talk about this sort of thing.
Well, and of course they did. Yeah, they're lined up with the stars in Orion's belt, and I'll even grant you that. I'll even say, they did that on purpose.
Yeah, that's their argument. I don't.
But I mean, that's not hard. That's not hard surveying, right? To draw out a diagram. It's like the crop circles. Everybody thinks it's impressive when somebody does it, but you can draw a diagram on a piece of paper and plot it out, and just use hand tools to do the surveying part of it. And ropes, to limit how far out you can walk and things like that. And that's all you need to replicate that pattern. So, again, it doesn't require alien technology.
I think there's actually like a famous case of like a guy who went around just putting crop circles everywhere.
Oh, yeah. And he drew some beautiful designs. I mean, he was trying to go with like fractal patterns and stuff like that. They were very elaborate. And if you didn't stop and think about it, and you didn't see it done, you would believe that no person could do that by hand.
Yeah.
I saw that documentary. It was pretty cool. He had his rope and his 2x4 and was showing you how he did it.
Yeah, just walking around in circles out in the field, just pressing down the corn or whatever it was.
Yeah, Scott?
Yeah, how would they line up, I guess is the question, because the stars move in the sky. So how would they, it would only line up at a certain time at night, I guess?
That's right.
Yeah.
It only lines up at a certain time of night. It only lines up at a certain day of the year, exactly. And, you could say, all right, well, it was the summer solstice when they did it, and it was at midnight, and that's fine. They could still, draw that at that time of day because that was a significant time. They knew what the summer solstice was even back then.
Right.
So it's just like the Stonehenge thing. The stones are set to let the sun come through during the equinox, if I remember right. Well, they'd been making calendar observations for a lot of years at that point. So the fact that they knew that day was the equinox, it had a significance to them, but it's not like they couldn't technically do it. They knew when the equinox was going to happen.
And they seem to uncover a lot more trenches and things that they attribute to calendar keeping around Stonehenge that seem to be older than the actual stones.
Yeah, of course. So it's an evolution, right? It's progression. You start by just making tick marks in the ground and keeping those for a few decades. And then you go, hey, let's stick a stone rock here because we know that this tick mark is where the solstice is. This tick mark is where the equinox is.
Now, another thing that ties into this is apparently there's like certain formations that you can only see from the air that form certain things, and apparently that's aliens as well.
That's the Nazca lines. Yeah, that was a big thing for a while.
I just heard something. I think it was on TV, maybe an article. But anyways, that the Nazca lines supposedly point to water.
To water?
Yeah, water in the ground. That was the original. That's they're people who live in the desert, so
sure.
It makes sense to make markers, and these markers developed into these big elaborate, I don't know what you call it, path, I guess, to water in the ground.
Yeah, well, directional sign. I mean, that's what we're talking about. Arrow.
Right.
Just a really, really elaborate arrow. And again, they could...
If you lived there for a few thousand years.
They could plot it out so that they couldn't see the big picture. So for religious reasons, they made some thing in the ground that some god, quote unquote, could see. But they could still, again, draw a picture on a piece of papyrus and then plot it out using some very simple surveying methods and still be able to draw the picture without seeing all of it.
But it has to be so much more, for us. It could have started out as something basic, like Scott was just talking about, and then went into some other sort of god thing or alien thing, and just like going back to the Ben's the pyramids. It's almost like for so long we've always needed to know, where we come from, or and so it's either gods or it's aliens or it's or whatever.
Yeah.
When it comes right back down to it, there's a pretty basic explanation for it.
Well, and again, some of it's just the political environment, the culture we're talking about too. You can do a lot with 20,000 people worth of slave labor, and you're the king and you want it done. You want to appease this god that you've decided exists. So you're going to build this big pyramid out in the desert, and you can order 100,000 people to go do it for you. It doesn't take any more than that in that setting.
And I take issue with people who run their mouth online that says that it had to be aliens because we weren't sophisticated. It takes away from where we came from.
You're right.
It truly are.
It's an insult to the human race when people say that kind of thing.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Because humans can do some really impressive things, and we're doing impressive things even back in antiquity, even back before Christ.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, Summer. Go ahead.
I have one more question. I know that the stars only appear static in the sky. Over the 44,500 years that the pyramids have been, wouldn't the stars have moved? So maybe when they built it, it wasn't lined up with the lines belt?
I actually did a posting on this not that long ago. Somebody was trying to say that it can't be right because the stars would be all out of alignment. We know the translational speed of those stars. Even after 44,000 years, it's only like a tenth of or 2/10 of a degree that it would have changed.
Interesting.
So
Wow.
yeah, it's not very much at all.
Very good. Thank you, Dr. Ben.
Well, you're quite welcome. I'll dig up that post for you if you're really interested, because I did the math and everything.
Hashtag Ask Dr. Ben.
There you go. Nothing like getting a plug in there right in the middle of the talk.
Yeah.
There you
Right?
go.
All right. So, did you have anything you wanted to say or bring up? Or
I did have something that popped in my mind when I was listening to the new In Search Of, by the way, that the History Channel is resurrecting. There was a story that I got to tell you guys. Back in 94, when I first started teaching, when I first got out of grad school, I had a little bit of grant money, for teaching aids. And I bought a couple of and this was from a reputable educational company, but I bought a couple of VHS videos on UFOs and investigating UFOs. And the funny thing about that is I showed that in class one day, and I ended up apologizing to the class because everything on those videos were just nothing but hokey crap. You could literally see the films they had and see the thing, obviously a hubcap from a car, either being thrown across frisbee-like across the field or dangling there by some piece of fishing line, and you could see it wobbling just like it was hanging from a single piece of fishing line. It was so bad. And so I think that's part of the problem with the UFO things. I think there's real stuff out there. It may be military, it may be, something else. But the problem with these UFO, the UFO thing is that every freaking lunatic that wants to get noticed and wants to have a story gloms onto it, whether they've actually seen anything or not. And I think that's a big part of the problem too. Is you got to
brought that up actually.
You got to separate the wheat from the chaff, and there's a whole lot of chaff in there.
It's really hard to find. I dug for this to try and find like any credible videos, and they're few and far between. I think I only found like maybe one thing that could have been something, and that was from like the Air Force, I believe it was.
Right.
So
the shape they were tracking that they didn't know what it was.
What?
I said that shape they were tracking on the film that they didn't know what it was.
Yes.
That's
like the closest I could find. Everything else was either a hoax or like just, I don't know, like something that wasn't really like a thing.
Right.
Right. So, would you guys mind if I asked a question here?
Absolutely.
So, Ben, I don't know exactly how to word this, but I've heard that, without making assumptions, I've heard that just for sheer numbers and math reasons, the number of galaxies and the number of stars that are out there, that it's more probable that there might be something out there besides us, and we have to get away from our primitive thinking and whatnot to get around that. But I mean, what sort of what do you think about that? I mean, how do you feel about all that?
Oh, I give a whole talk, that I've done. That's one of my more popular talks. I've done it for years now when I go to the cons and stuff, on the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. And I'm fascinated by it. I have to believe that there's somebody else out there. There's intelligent life out there. So I come down on that side of it clearly, but have we ever seen it? Have we ever witnessed it? That's where it gets hard. And, I hate to go right to the crux of the biscuit here, but I actually do that equation you're talking about, that Drake equation. I actually put my own numbers in there, based on what I think are reasonable estimates. And my posit is that there's about 1,000 civilizations out there in the Milky Way galaxy right now. And that puts them at an average distance of about 1,000 light years apart. And I take the math one more step further from there, and if there's 1,000 civilizations in the galaxy and they're all an average of 1,000 light years apart, that means that there's only about a 50% chance that we'll ever hear from one of them.
Right.
We're just not listening at the right time. They're just not talking at the right time. So there's a lot of things that can go wrong with that. The other thing that's built into my talk that's not fun to talk about, but we may have to come to grips with the fact that the speed of light really is the universal speed limit. We may not be able to make a starship that can do warp 10 and get from this star to that star in an hour.
Right.
And if your nearest neighbor is 1,000 light years away, even if you know he's there and it's going to take you 1,000 years to physically come and visit him, you're probably not going to bother. You're going to need a generational starship. You're going to ask, well, what are we going to get? Can't we just talk to him over a radio? you're going to ask, what's in it for me, because that's a huge
Right.
engineering effort, no matter how advanced your civilization is.
Sure, sure. I've also heard that some people speculate that we're way out here on the outside of the tendrils of our universe, and that we're just out in the backwaters and just this uninteresting race, and that the rest of them that are closer into the middle of the galaxy are just so far advanced that it would be like, I think someone coined it, it would be like going, purposely going to Africa to examine an anthill or something. So, I mean, there's just so many things.
Right. No, that's absolutely right. We're 2/3 of the way out in what's called the Orion Spur. So we're not even on a main leg of the Milky Way galaxy. So you've almost got to make a deliberate effort to come and see us, especially if you're in a galactic civilization that's at the core of the galaxy. We really are out in the backwoods.
Wow. So that really does that does make sense.
But that's actually good for us, though, right? As a society and as people, because it means we'll relatively be left alone for a while.
Is that a good thing? Stephen Hawking would agree with you. I don't know that I would necessarily agree with that, but he would.
Well, it was a question, yeah. What do you think?
You're in good company. I mean, I guess the first question you've got to ask yourself, because people always make the argument of when the Spaniards came to the Americas and they killed all the Native Americans and all that, but hopefully these people would be, if they're an advanced society, hopefully they'd be a little bit more enlightened than the Spaniards of, the 1400s. So,
Right.
There's that. But, I think the real question you've got to ask yourself, as we move into a world of nothing but global trade, is it better to have nothing but local businesses and interaction with people, or is it better to spread out and to have as much contact with as many different people as you can? It takes a village, right? Isn't that what Hillary told us?
Right.
And, and so we do seem to...
Scott, I'd like to say...
What was that?
Scott, I'd like to say that, just in my opinion, I've seen, I'm Native, and so I know my history, and I know the, species we are, what we've done to the planet, and all the rest of it. So, I mean, it'd be wonderful if this is how you need to do things, or help us a little bit, because it's just, it's pretty crazy, man. I mean, I see our species, and just for so many different reasons, I kind of just go, what the heck?
Right.
Really? We've got opposing thumbs and a higher brain, and we're pulling this kind of crap? So, yeah, I think it'd be great if something came along and helped nudge us along a little bit and say, hey, listen, this is how things are going, and this is how things have gone this whole time, under your control, and this is how we do things, and maybe learn some things. I mean, anyway.
I couldn't agree with you more, but I guess the other side of the coin is you don't know what they're going to do.
Right.
Sure.
And that's good or bad. If aliens showed up tomorrow, I think it's hard to calculate what would happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I actually agree with that, but, it's a crapshoot. But in the same token, don't judge other species by what we do. We'd never talk to anybody if we do that. That doesn't seem like...
That's what we've done this whole time, man. It's fascinating how we'll just jump out there and do something and screw whatever happens later. It's... But anyway, that was my little fantasy about how I'd like to be able to interact with and help us better ourselves and maybe become more one with our planet and the other species.
So, is there anything else that anybody wanted to say before we kind of wrap this up?
Well,
I'm good.
I did. You saw this little 2-paragraph blurb I sent you from
Yes.
Michael Shermer's Why People Believe Weird Things?
Yeah.
Great read.
Do we want to read that into the record, or do we want to mention it, or do
Go
we
ahead,
just want to
yeah.
leave that for another day? You want me to read it?
Yeah, go ahead, read it. It's fine.
Well, this goes to the idea of mass hysteria, and the fact that in the 70s everybody saw flying saucers. I guess in the 60s and 70s everybody saw flying saucers. In the 80s, suddenly it was triangular-shaped craft, which looked a lot more like stealth aircraft as they came to be known later, right? So it seems like these beliefs evolve, and people keep seeing different things based on, what time frame they're in. So that said, let me read this excerpt from you from Chapter 7. It's the intro to Chapter 7 in Michael Sherman's book, Why People Believe Weird Things. In the small town of Mattoon, Illinois, a woman says that a stranger entered her bedroom late at night on Thursday, August 31st, 1944, and anesthetized her legs with a spray gas. She reported the incident the next day, claiming she was temporarily paralyzed. The Saturday edition of the Mattoon Daily Journal-Gazette ran the headline, "Anesthetic Prowler on the Loose." In the days to come, several other cases were reported. The newspaper covered these new incidents under the headline, "Mad Anesthetist Strikes Again." The perpetrator became known as the Phantom Gasser of Mattoon. Soon cases were occurring all over Mattoon. The state police were brought in. Husbands stood guard with loaded guns, and many first-hand sightings were recounted. In the course of 13 days, a total of 25 cases were reported. After a fortnight, however, no one was caught, no chemical clues were discovered, the police spoke of wild imaginations, and the newspapers began to characterize the story as a case of mass hysteria. We've heard all this before. If the story sounds familiar, it might be because it's the same components as an alien abduction experience, only the paralysis is the work of the mad anesthetist rather than aliens. Strange things going bump in the night, interpreted in the context of the time and culture of the victims, whipped into a phenomenon through rumor and gossip. And we're talking about modern versions of medieval witch crazes. Most people do not believe in witches anymore, and no one is burned. And for that matter, nobody sees witches casting spells on them anymore either. So I thought that was an interesting thing to throw in there, because it does seem like we see what we want to see to some degree, and we see what other images people have put in our heads. Does anybody have any additional thoughts on that?
You guys,
No, I can agree with that.
you guys can edit. Oh,
Go
sorry.
ahead.
Sorry about
No,
that.
it's fine. Go ahead.
One of the things I wanted to point out was that this happened to me in '82, and I had never heard about any triangles, mile-wide, triangles. And I guess the Phoenix Lights, which was described as basically the same thing, I don't know, I guess it wasn't that in the 2000s or the late 90s or something?
96, I believe.
It was, and there actually was a I remember seeing on the Discovery Channel years ago, and I would put that around in the mid 90s as well, a show about the kind of ship you're talking about being spotted over Indiana and Illinois, and it going on for hours, and thousands of people supposedly seeing it, even though it was in the middle of the night. So it is kind of a common thing, this triangular ship. And again, this triangular ship may be real. This may be like an airship that the military's been experimenting with, and we just don't know about it. It may not.
Something to that.
Yeah, it may not have anything to do with aliens, but you could have absolutely seen something real.
Go ahead, Scott.
Right.
Yeah. When I lived in Vegas, I lived there for about 10 years, and my neighbor was a colonel in the Air Force who was stationed at Nellis. And, I harangued him all the time about stuff that, was in the news or articles I had read or documentaries I had seen. And we got into a conversation one night about stealth blimps. And he said that that there was absolutely things as stealth blimps, and a lot of them were used for testing reconnaissance. Because they're quiet, easily absorb radar waves. So, who's to say what you saw wasn't some sort of military transport that they were testing? You know?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know what it was. Yeah. What struck me most was the immensity of it, and that it made no sound whatsoever, and it was so slow. So who knows what it was.
Well, and for most of us nowadays, that seems very surreal, but most of us aren't used to seeing blimps flying around now either.
Right.
I mean, you got the Goodyear blimp at the football game maybe, but you're not talking about a stealth blimp. You're not talking about one that's specifically made to have super quiet engines and stuff like that.
All right. Well, I have to go make dinner, and so I guess we're gonna wrap this up. That's all right.
Well, we can definitely do that. I think we've covered all
Thank you guys.
all the big things.
Yeah, it's been fun.
Thanks for having me.
Well,
Thank you.
thank you for being on with us. We'll try to get this out in short order. Hopefully, I'm not going to do a lot of offline editing on it. I'm just going to throw it out there.
Seems like we did pretty good, honestly.
I think so.
That was fun.
Absolutely.
Thanks a lot for having me, guys. That was really cool.
Thank you.
All right, guys. Take care.
Bye, guys.
Take it easy.